Hey everybody, we're the Menschwarmers, your bi-weekly look at the world of Jews and sports. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. I am very good. My wife has not yet given birth, although she might by the time this airs. I don't know.
It's true, it's a podcast. People could be listening to this 5 years from now. Hope the future is great. And Gabe's baby is now a 5-year-old.
Inshallah, when our popularity is so great that we decide to release our archives.
Our archives, right. Did you have a nice Zoom Seder? I assume you did one of those?
It was a good Zoom Seder. We only did one, just I think for the general, it's hard to get up the koyach for 2 long Zoom Seders. Everybody sits on Zoom all day. We see enough of our family. We just did one quick Zoom Seder.
Boy, what fools we all were last year when we said, next year in person.
Yes, I made that joke again this year.
Another one.
Though, got a question about your Zoom Seder, and I'll ask this, to anyone listening. Do you guys break for dinner and then go back later for the end?
No, we did all the portions of the Seder, and we did a food exchange outside. We sort of, everyone brought an element of the meal and we took it home, and then we did the Seder, and then with a few eating things in it, like the bitter greens or the egg, and then we broke, and it was like, all right, everyone go enjoy your meal, and then that was it.
Yeah, that was.
We didn't come back after
that. We didn't come back.
Babies had to be put to bed, and anyways. But it was nice. It was nice to eat food from my family. All the great cooks in my family who normally I would eat their cooking lots of times, and now it's just like once a year.
When you were a kid, did you have any religious friends where your family went to their 5-hour Seder?
No, in fact, I've only ever been to my Seders that my own family held, or less religious, or less strictly religious. So I've never been to one of those intense, don't start until 8:15. 5-hour long, we're telling, reading every portion of the Bible kind of thing. Seders. Maybe it'd be interesting to go to one sometime.
I remember once as a kid, and I still remember this. It was my parents' friend, very religious guy, took a sip of the first cup of the wine and said, that's good squishy.
When we were at McGill, my sister-in-law's family's from Montreal, and they would always have me over as a guest to their Seder, which was very nice, but it was pretty informal. It wasn't religious. It was a lot of people. But my sister-in-law's mom is Sephardic, and they ate kitniyot before it was cool, just old school Sephardic. We don't do this. And as a vegetarian, the amount of rice and bean dishes and lentils and things like that at the Seder was so high. It was great. Those are my favorite food Seders.
Not like in 2021 where everyone's just all right, we're going to make a mujadara and eat it, and it'll be fine.
Now, do you eat kitniyot now? You must, right?
We're trying not to.
Are you having coffee?
Yeah, I'm having coffee. Coffee would be the only one. But
right.
Having coffee, we corn and rice pasta is a thing that some people eat that without gluten, we don't eat that. But my wife has celiac disease, so we don't eat a lot of kitniyot anyway. Or sorry, we eat a lot of kitniyot, don't eat a lot of chametz anyway.
Right.
So it was only a small fire in our house, not the whole bonfire to burn everything. We had a controlled blaze.
What's your favorite Passover food?
I really like matzah with cheese melted on it, just like a classic matzah pizza. I do eat peanut butter on matzah. That is kitniyot, and I do eat that sometimes. What about you?
I think I'm a big charoset fan. Both my aunt makes a classic Ashkenazi apples and wine and nuts charoset, and my wife's mom makes a dried fruit, lemon peel, and walnut charoset. Both kinds, fantastic. No debates here. All charoset's welcome, as far as I'm concerned.
Our charoset this year was very, very different. It was mashed dates, almonds, and cocoa powder. It was delicious.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Sort of sounds like a power bar.
It was like a power bar, yeah. But it was terrific.
So what's going on this week in sports? Gabe, you mentioned that there's a new racing season that's coming?
Yeah, the F1 season started yesterday with the very Jewish Grand Prix in Bahrain.
However, it's so funny. There's really an increasing amount of weird individual sports that take place in the Gulf states. It's it used to just be there was one tennis match in Dubai, and now it's I feel every other week it's there's something going on in Bahrain,
it's
Qatar.
Very
Dubai.
Controversial this year because F1 is going to Saudi Arabia for the first time ever.
Oh wow!
They're throwing around their money and they're going, but F1 is
that makes
notable.
sense. You got to go to the source of the fuel.
Right. It's probably the cheapest race they're going to put on because they can just pipe the gas straight into the cars. Though I asked this, there's a Jewish driver in F1. His father is the Jewish team owner. We've talked about this before. The Stroll family, Lance Stroll, the driver, Lawrence, the father.
Right.
I wonder if they're in, I don't know the name of the city in Bahrain they were in, but they're in Bahrain. It's Saturday night. Do you think they had a Seder the night before the race? I hope so. Just the two of them
question.
on Zoom back with the family in Montreal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if you're on Zoom anyways, it doesn't really matter where you are. You can have a Zoom Seder anywhere. That's as legit as any other ones.
At the start of the broadcast, the broadcaster said, the F1 season is here. Finally, a Zoom meeting we can all get excited about.
That's clever. Well, speaking of Gulf State championships, the Dubai Tennis Championship happened recently, and it was won by Aslan Karatsev, the Russian-Israeli tennis player who, made that sort of amazing run in the Australian Open, and now he has his first win.
Given that he's Israeli, was he allowed to compete in this tournament like 6 months ago?
Interesting question. We should probably do some research into that history and talk about it sometime, because there has been an interesting history of Israeli sports in the Middle East. I think for the most part, most of the Gulf, I would think Dubai would have probably been okay with it.
Yeah,
and
it's
now
not like
there's
the Iranian soccer team refusing to show up and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But also, he is Russian, so he travels under a Russian passport now, I assume. And
interesting.
I guess there have been places in the world where if you had an Israeli stamp on your passport, they wouldn't let you in. But I don't know if Dubai would have been one of them, and they probably would have made an exception for a top athlete, anyways.
I think it's the same with F1. I think Lance Stroll could get into Bahrain under a Canadian passport.
Exactly.
Maybe he's been in Israel. I don't know, but he actually scored a point. He came in 9th in the race, which sort of, it's not great, but it's in the top half, and it helps his Canadian Jewish-owned team succeed.
That's great. Yeah, not a lot else sports-wise. We are going to come back after a quick break with our baseball Seder. Celebrating
baseball starting in like 3 days.
Yeah,
it's very exciting.
Celebrating Passover and baseball at the same time.
It's the real spring Shehechianu.
That's right. A new year for the Jews and a new year for the baseball players. But
it's about midway through the Jews.
Well, it's the old New Year was the spring, right? I mean,
right.
It's one of the Jewish New Years.
It's the egg. It's the circle of life.
Exactly. Springtime, first day of spring, birds chirping, all that crap. Anyways, but before we get to that, we should mention that you and I were guests on another podcast called Dear Adam Silver, hosted by our new friend Abigail Smithson.
My understanding is this podcast is listened to directly. It is the whole thing is a message directly to Adam Silver for his audience, for him to specifically hear, which is great.
Yeah, hopefully it's going right to his ear holes. We had a sort of wide-ranging conversation about Jews and sports and all kinds of stuff, Jewish athletes, all sorts of fun stuff we talk about here in sort of untethered way. So we'd ask everyone to go check that out if you can't get enough Menschwarmers. Again, it's called Dear Adam Silver, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you think Adam Silver and David Stern ever had a Seder together?
Ooh, interesting question.
Like notable basketball Jews, both lived in New York.
I can't imagine they ever would have had to, because like their office was in New York. So I don't, it would be easy enough to go home. Like March, April is always like the doldrums of the NBA season, right? So it's like, you can't imagine any situation where they were like on the road at the NBA finals and they needed to make a Seder happen.
No, probably not. But I also wonder that they're starting to executives, they're starting to know each other, they're starting to be friends. And David would say to Adam, Adam, we're having a Seder. I think you and your wife should come, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I bet that's happened.
Maybe. Anyways, we'll be take a quick break and we'll be back with our baseball Seder. We are recording this on Monday, March 29th. The Passover Seder was about 2 days ago, and baseball opening day is 3 days from now. We're right in the middle in this special part of spring between these two sort of emblematic spring things for Jews everywhere. And, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. There's a long story about, people often talk about how the Last Supper was on a Passover Seder.
Right.
Jesus was nailed to the cross. He was hung up. And then 2 days later, he came back.
So they say.
So they say. He came back. But I think we can all agree he came back for one reason and one reason only. And that's opening day, baby.
Yeah, I think opening day is a real, moment. Baseball's back. It's more than half the year that we do baseball. There's games every day, and baseball is sort of, the most beloved sport for lots of Jews in America and in Canada and around the world. And there's a lot of similarities between the two, both of them starting in spring. And I thought it would be nice to sort of go through the Seder, the order of events, telling the story, but we're going to put a little bit of a baseball swing on things. And there's a lot of overlap between the two things, and I think it'll be fun to go through it a little bit.
I want to start. Before we start, I want to give you a brief quotation from the Jewish folk musician Dan Byrne, who sings in his song "Opening Day." We're all undefeated. It's opening day. Everybody's shoulder feels okay.
It is a time of hope,
and I think birth, of renewal.
Passover is a time of birth and renewal. So let's start the top of the order. Batting first, we got Kadesh. Kadesh, the Kiddush blessing. Let us consider ourselves blessed that baseball season is upon us. And I'm going to ask everybody that instead of pouring the first glass of wine, we're going to talk about the first baseman in the Jewish Hall of Fame. And Gabe, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the greatest Jewish first baseman, Hank Greenberg.
So he's not just the first baseman in the Jewish Hall of Fame, but he's also the first baseman in the Jewish Hall of Fame. He's sort of the originator of all of the Jewish baseball history. He's sort of everyone's idol. People talk about Hank Greenberg as being sort of their icon, of our grandparents' generation. He was the hero. He hit 58 home runs, was the most other than Babe Ruth, retired with a batting average over 330, had 17 really spectacular years in the league. I mean, I didn't play 17 full years. He played about 12, split up by the war and injury. But really is, a true baseball icon. Orthodox parents growing up from Romania in Greenwich Village. He's got brothers, Joseph and Benny. His father was a successful schmata salesman, really classic, down the line, central casting Jewish sports icon, in a tenement until they made it out and went to the Bronx, grew up loving the Yankees. The Yankees actually recruited him and in probably the most, they couldn't sign him because of they had Lou Gehrig in the way. Lou Gehrig, obviously famous Yankee, and then Hank Greenberg, the Iron Horse. Hank Greenberg did exactly what his parents wanted him to do and declined a job with the New York Yankees to go to university. Finally, after going to university, he signed with the Detroit Tigers for the princely sum of $9,000. And a legend was born, Hammer and Hank himself.
Yeah, he led the league in RBIs, led the league in homers a few times, two-time MVP, Baseball Hall of Famer, all-around good guy. So, a quick motzi, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, brei pri Hank Greenberg. And that's Kadesh. Let's move on. Seder. Seder, of course, means order. In baseball, we have the batting order. So we're going to go down the batting order. On deck, we have Urchatz. Urchatz is the ritual hand washing. And we can see the beginning of the season as a washing of the old records, the old standings. Every team's record is 0-0. There's 162 games to play. We all have clean hands.
And everybody's shoulder feels okay.
Everyone's shoulder feels okay. And every pitcher's hands are, clean and unstained with the combination of pine tar and sunscreen that they will soon apply to their hands, even in night games and played in the dome, so that they can doctor baseballs, which apparently they're cracking down on. So we'll see.
The doctoring of baseballs, I don't know if anyone's made this joke, but I wonder if Jewish players are more successful at the doctoring of baseballs.
My son, the baseball doctorer.
Exactly, my son, the baseball doctor. I'm sorry, Mom, or I'm sorry, Dad. I know I'm not a surgeon, but I have doctored many baseballs in my time.
Right. Moving on, in the hole, in the 3 spot, we got karpas. Karpas is dipping a vegetable into salt water, which represents the tears of slavery. While we have hope and the refreshment of the new year, we also have bitterness over last year's loss. Whether, our team bottomed out in the regular season, For example, if we have any listeners in Baltimore, or if our team, like our beloved Blue Jays, made the playoffs, or even as our friends in Southwest Florida,
very quickly,
swept out quickly, or our friends in West Florida and Tampa who made it all the way to the World Series. We remember the bitterness of last year. Dodgers fans, you can skip this step. Feel free to be celebratory about last year, but everybody else, remember the bitterness. Remember the bitterness and the sadness of last year.
Multiple Dodgers fans we know, dozens, thousands, including the Winkler family, friends of the podcast.
Yeah,
they can actually skip this one in the Seder.
Exactly.
I'm sure they'll enjoy doing it. Although I wonder, as I saw this script, I wondered if you could think. In Cleveland for a long time, do you think they ever called this the Kipnis?
The Kipnis instead of the Karpas. It's not
instead
bad.
of the Karpas.
After Jason Kipnis.
I'm going to dunk the Kipnis in the salt water.
Now, batting cleanup with the bases loaded, we have the fourth element of the Seder, Yachatz. And this is splitting the matzah.
That's what you call a player when he strikes out.
This is the taking of the matzah in the middle to hide as the afikomen for children to find later. Let us remember that baseball is ultimately a game for children, and if we're lucky enough to attend games this year, we'll remember that and act responsibly and realize that it is ultimately at the end of the day just a game. This is for kids, and it's children who will carry the game forward into the future.
Very, very, very well told. It is a children's game. But it is a fun one, and as you said, it is sort of the story of rebirth, similar to the story of Passover to carry on. And baseball is always something like the Afikomen we can find that is always there for us.
Yeah. Moving on to the 5-hole, we have Magid. And Magid, we're going to start by pouring the second cup of wine, but in this case, we have the second baseman of the Seder.
Hey!
And our Jewish second baseman to focus on is Ian Kinsler. Ian Kinsler is a longtime member of the Texas Rangers. He was then traded to Detroit for Prince Fielder, and he had a few years there, still at his prime. He was, second baseman who had solid power. Second all time among Jews in doubles. First all time among Jews in stolen bases. He was a 4-time All-Star. He retired after I think the 2019 season. He sort of bounced around for a few years at the end, but he
played
was
in LA, got to play in a Jewish Mecca at the end of his career.
Do you think he was like a 30-30 guy? He had 1,999 career hits, pretty very very solid career. Hall of very good kind of guy.
Totally. And I bet you his parents ever sort of, when he was playing in Detroit, might have gone to Miguel Cabrera's parents and said, doubles are very important too.
And Ian is going to be joining Team Israel this year in Tokyo. So looking forward to the future. We haven't really talked much about Israel baseball in the last couple months, but, have no fear. It's something we're going to focus on a lot in the coming months going into the summer and the baseball season. So the Olympic teams are typically made up of minor league and college players and players who have recently retired. So someone like Ian Kinsler, who, decided to hang up his cleats in terms of Major League Baseball, still has a chance to make an impact for the Israel team. He's only 39, 38 years old right now. And
he is now an Israeli citizen.
He's now an Israeli citizen. He got Israeli citizenship so that he can play for Team Israel. So that's great and something definitely to look forward to.
One thing that I think is great about Ian Kinsler is that he's got a great story that apparently many years ago at the opening day, they're playing the Red Sox. He hits a single. He's on base, and the first thing Kevin Youkilis says to him is, "Happy Passover."
That's great. Kevin Youkilis, the
Greek god of walks,
the Jewish god of walks.
He's
the
not
Jewish
Greek.
God, not known by his name, but he's Greek. His last name's Greek, but he is Jewish and a great Jewish baseball player as well. The other part of Magid is to tell the story of Passover. So I wanted to incorporate a few elements of the telling the story of Passover, and I'm going to lead us down an intonation of the instead of the 10 plagues that plagued the Egyptians brought by God. We're going to talk about the 10 players that we have, 10 current Jewish players, sort of. Who are currently playing in Major League Baseball. Blyer, Bregman, Fried, Kramer, Peterson, Pilar, Sheriff, Stock, Telez, Ryan Braun. Ryan Braun got the hammer there as the death of the firstborn.
I was going to say, is there a reason Ryan Braun was specifically the death of the firstborn?
Well, two reasons. One, he is sort of almost retired and may be retired. Former Jewish, continued to be slightly Jewish, former MVP, also former, convicted steroid offender. So that's the reason.
He was let go on the technicality. He lawyered his way out of it. That's the way. That's the Jewish way.
Yeah. So those are the 10 players, and moving on now, we have 4 questions about why is this season different from every other season. But these 4 questions are about 4 Jewish players.
So I believe I'm younger than you, Jamie, so I can start with the first question.
Okay, thank you. I will do my best to answer them.
Ma nishtana. Jock Peterson has shown tremendous praise and can hit the ball very hard. He's having a spectacular spring. It looks like he's going to make the team, but can he become an all-star again?
It's hard to say. Jock Peterson is someone who had tremendous promise when he came up with the Dodgers. The bashing boy chick, he was someone we saw at home run derbies, had an all-star appearance early in his career. He has 8 home runs now this spring, which is, fantastic for any set of 20 games you play. He's going to be an everyday player for the Chicago Cubs, and they, could be okay. They could be sort of wild card contention team. Jock Peterson definitely has the potential to break out in a way that he didn't in LA. And, the training wheels are off. It's time to show what you got. Now you're the big free agent signing. Let's see what you got, Jock.
It's a great answer. Manishtana. Rowdy Tellez is stuck behind a star-studded Toronto lineup, and specifically Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first. Can he hit well enough to become an everyday player?
This is the one that's closest to my heart. Rowdy Tellez is just one of those guys you love to root for.
It's really hard not to root for a fat Jewish guy named Rowdy.
Yeah, exactly. The name is fantastic. He has shown real pop in his bat that he can hit the ball hard, but doesn't play much defense. He'd really have to hit well to make it for Toronto this year to be an everyday DH. But I think he can do it. Let's see. Let's hope he can do it.
Amazing. Manishtana. After going 7-0 with a 2.25 ERA and coming in 5th last year in the Cy Young, is Max Fried the next great Atlanta pitcher, or maybe the first great Jewish pitcher since Sandy?
Maybe. We've talked a lot about Jewish hitters, and there have been plenty of Jewish pitchers here and there, but there hasn't really been an all-star or an all-time great Jewish pitcher since the great Sandy Koufax. Max Fried is young. He's got a killer fastball. And he is going to be great again. He had a great year last year, and I think we should all be excited to see what he's going to do. A little different than most Jewish players. You only get to see him every 5 days, but keep an eye on Max Fried. He is definitely the young Jewish player.
And he's got a lot of Koufax in him. He's left-handed. He throws a million different pitches. I find during the broadcast, and I can't decide if I think this is anti-Semitic or not, but they always make a point of saying his favorite player was Sandy Koufax growing up. Max Fried, very, very intelligent young man who loved Sandy Koufax. Wink, wink.
That was one of the things. That was one of the things they said about Sandy Koufax, right? They always suggest that he was a real intellectual, and Sandy had to make a big show of saying, "Oh, I'm just a regular guy" and all that. So interesting to see. Hopefully they don't talk too much about him being crafty, although that is often something they say about lefties, and unfortunately something they say about Jews.
It's true. A crafty lefty who is collecting all of the money away from all of the other players every time he strikes out, if they start saying he's taking some money away from any free agents, that's when maybe we got to watch out for that Joe Buck. Or Buck has to say about him.
Yeah.
And then finally, the fourth question, Ma Nishtana. Is Ryan Braun retiring?
I think the answer is probably yes to that one. That's the simple one. That's the simple one.
So,
yeah, it seems like
ask, it. Is Ryan Braun the simple boy?
We've
got the 4 sons. Is he the simple one?
I tried to do the 4 sons, but I couldn't quite make it work. But I did know that Bregman was going to be the wicked son because of his participation in the Astros cheating scandal. We've told the story of the baseball season going into it. Unlike Passover, we don't really have answers to all these questions. The only answer is how the season plays out. Moving on to the batting 6, we have Rachsa. We wash our hands again. Game's over. You got to clean up again, hit the showers. The 7, 8, and 9 hitters, no one really cares about. So I lumped a few of these Passover Seder items together. Mutzi, matzah, maror, korech, shulchan orech. These are all the eating ones.
Ryan Braun might also be the maror of the Jewish baseball experience.
That's true. He's bitter because he's,
he's bitter about losing his job.
And maybe not having another one.
About his reputation.
Yeah. But talking about, all these, the Seder meal is an important part of it, obviously. Baseball has a lot of food that's part of it as well. We've talked before about kosher places to eat inside of ballparks if you keep kosher. And, the prototypical baseball food, not unlike the typical Passover food, is a questionable sandwich. In baseball, it's the hot dog. In Passover, it's the Rabbi Hillel sandwich of matzah and lamb and maror.
Can't forget the maror.
Which may be the first sandwich in recorded history. So 2 questionable sandwiches to think about. Going to move on here to the tzafun, which I think is the 7th inning stretch. The meal is over. We stretch and enjoy the afikomen at the end of the meal. And what do we do in baseball? The 7th inning stretch. It's the end of the meal. It's the end of our, of our patience, of our teams losing. It's the last call for beer, and it's time to drink the 3rd cup, Gabe. So why don't you tell us, instead of the 3rd cup, the 3rd baseman of the baseball?
That's a great segue about the 3rd baseman. We get to the original Hebrew Hammer here, at least who they claim to be the first guy named the Hebrew Hammer. Following in the footsteps of his idol, Hank Greenberg, he came out of the military in order to join the Cleveland Baseball Club. He was a 4-time All-Star. He was the AL MVP as well. He was the only guy to ever win both the MVP and the MLB Executive of the Year award. Not a lot of guys have done both.
That's very cool.
But the only one is Al Rosen, which sort of fits the Jewish aspect of excellence in all times. He was in charge of the Yankees. He was in charge of the Astros and in charge of the Giants, and was known sort of as a player's guy. He could kibitz with the best of them. He's a ball player. Casey Stengel very famously said about him that, he's the ideal of a player. He's your hard-nosed player. He works his ass off every game, always the highest. And unfortunately, his career only lasted 11 years, and he retired at age 32. Sort of worked in finance for his career before going back into baseball as a ball player. Not only that, Al Rosen very famously was extremely proud about his Judaism. He is known for straight up anytime another player on another team or on his own team even would say something anti-Semitic, he would fight them. Al Rosen was a boxer in his youth and as a teenager. And Al Rosen once also threatened to fight Ed Sullivan because Ed Sullivan said he wasn't Jewish enough. And Al Rosen was a really, really sort of I'm trying to think of a Yiddish word for this, but he was like a real tough guy.
I like a real scrappy Jew. It's not an archetype that we think of so much.
No, it's not something we wouldn't do of. Another very notable thing about Al Rosen sometimes is he actually wouldn't play on Yom Kippur even before Sandy Koufax would. And Sandy Koufax has said before that he was inspired by Al Rosen to do it.
And he was on the Cleveland baseball team, as we're going to call them, that won the 1948 World Series, the last championship in Cleveland.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of Al Rosen's teammates said, thankfully, people thought he was the toughest guy to get out in all of baseball. Which, again, as a serviceman in World War II and post-World War II America with a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of post-Holocaust, I think Al Rosen is a very notable Jewish athlete who inspires us to be tough and survivors. He was a survivor, even though injuries took away his career. He had another career in finance and then another career as a baseball executive. So really impressive guy that we can all be inspired by.
So here's to Al Rosen, our third
baseman cup of wine.
Exactly. And we come now to the end of the Seder, Hallel. This is the time where we have all had 3 cups of wine by now, at least at a minimum. We've eaten our fill of the Passover meal, and it's time to sing joyful songs of praise, attempt to lure the baseball gods to our cause. So I have a modified version of a Passover favorite I'm going to share now. that we can think of for the baseball season of, what you want for the year going forward, the way you look at your team, and the question of, what is going to be enough. So, if we were to draft good players, and if those players were to become prospects, Dayenu. And if we can add a few players in free agency, and none of our pitchers need Tommy John surgery, Dayenu. And if we could just squeeze into the wild card game and maybe have a shot at making a run in the playoffs, Dayenu. And if we can win the whole World Series and maybe repeat again next year, Dayenu. I think the reality is that for the sports fan, the only thing that makes it enough is winning, and winning again and again and again. You can never have too much winning, and it'll never be enough. To be honest.
However, if those players were Jewish, Dayenu.
And as part of the Hallel, we drink the fourth cup of wine. Of course, baseball doesn't exactly have a fourth base, but if you make it past third base and you round home, there's no fourth baseman, but there is home plate. And home plate, of course, is guarded by a catcher. And the Jewish catcher that we want to talk about today, the fourth baseman, is Mo Berg. Mo Berg is the subject of a book called The Catcher Was a Spy by Nicholas Davidoff, which was turned into a movie starring, his name's escaping me now, Paul, what's his name? Ant-Man.
Paul Rudd.
Sorry.
The Ant-Man.
Yeah. I haven't seen the movie. Apparently it's quite bad. But Mo Berg is a very fascinating player, more for what he did off the field than what he did on the field. He was a guy who had a successful baseball career in terms of longevity. He was born in 1902 and originally played in 1923 for what was then called the Brooklyn Robins, later became the Dodgers, of course. And he continued playing well into 1939. He was never a big hitter. He hit 243 for his career, which isn't terrible for a catcher. But really what was special about him was he was considered the smartest man in baseball. He spoke multiple languages. He had gone to Princeton University and got a BA. He was someone who was known to read books in the dugout and stuff like that. He went to Columbia Law School after Princeton, missing a few weeks of spring training, and passed the New York State bar exam. He wasn't a guy who really had a big career as a baseball player, but a solid career. Catchers have that ability to sort of stick around for a while because of what they can do with pitchers. And then after his career, he had the opportunity to travel to Japan as part of a all-star team. And he was recruited by what was then called the Office of Strategic Services to take surreptitiously take spy film in Japan of Japanese factories and military facilities that was going to be important during the war. During World War II, he joined the OSS full time and became a spy and was someone that he had to go to Switzerland and go to lectures and learn about physics and nuclear science and stuff like that because he was this sort of brilliant odd guy. Ended his career. His life after that sort of took a downturn. He just sort of bummed around, staying with relatives and things like that. But, he had this amazing, interesting life, and I would definitely suggest checking out the book, The Catcher Was a Spy. A very interesting read and about a very idiosyncratic baseball player and Jewish American. Absolutely
fascinating stuff. Truly, Mo Berg is a really, really interesting guy.
And now the last order of our Seder, Nirtzah. This would be the time during the Seder where you would say next year in Jerusalem or next year just in person would be good enough for all of us. For 29 teams in Major League Baseball, this year is not going to end in the promised land. You're not going to get to the mountaintop, but there's always next year. There's always the dream of spring. And that I think is what is so amazing about baseball. Organized baseball has been played for, 140 years now. And there's always next year. There's always the dream that it's going to come back, and next year is going to be the team. And I think that's the story of Passover for the Jews as well.
It's the following Passover and the following opening day. It's always going to be there.
Yeah. But you got to have hope. As someone once said in Damn Yankees, a musical written by Jews, that you got to have hope, miles and miles and miles of hope. And if that isn't the story of the Jews, then I don't know what is. I think, Gabe, we've made it all the way from home plate to the Seder plate. We've done the whole batting order, the whole batting Seder, and I think that's a good place to stop, and look forward to the new year. Happy opening day to all those who celebrate. Happy Passover, Chag Sameach to all those who celebrate as well.
And thank you again for listening to the Benchwarmers podcast. You can find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Thanks again to Abigail for having us on Dear Adam Silver. We've got some media appearances popping up in the next little while.
You can follow us as always on Twitter at Menschwarmers for all the links and clicks on Jewish sports news, as well as our spiciest takes on the cinnamon toast shrimp. And
that guy's
news
such
of the day.
A liar. That's one of those things where I'm ashamed the guy's Jewish.
Yeah,
that's not good for the people.
It's not good for the people. Please like and subscribe, and keep listening to the Benchwarmers.
We would like to be stuck in your podcast feeds, just like the boat stuck in the Suez Canal.
Just like the matzah stuck in our digestive systems.
That's right. Many people have made this point, but I think it's very fitting that something came to part in Egyptian sea during Passover. For us in 2021,
and now it's gone. Just after the Seder.
Just after the Seder, they got it out. The boat is free.
The boat is free. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.